Today we're back with our fantastic panel. We're going to be talking about the Quran and its descriptions of Mecca. Are these actually descriptions of Jerusalem? And so far, the evidence does seem to weigh in the favor of Jerusalem. Last week, we spoke about the fishermen of Mecca, the beautiful farms of Mecca, and there aren't many lakes or seas in Mecca, so therefore we're wondering where those fishermen came from and all those beautiful farms and all the water needed for that. And today we're looking at more of the archaeology, more of the geography, more of the buildings and the things that are described. Odon's going to fill us in with more details. So I'm here with Odon Lafontaine of The Great Secret of Islam. We're here with Paul once more. Thank you, Paul. Of course, JC, Quranic Endgame, and the one and only Usama Dakdok, who comes on this channel far too often, but I can't get rid of him. I'm not sure why. But here he is, and he's joining us all the way from Missouri. And yes, welcome. So, Usama,
the show me state, man. Listen. Let me teach you something about Missouri. Here in the United States, we say, show me, prove it to me. That is Missouri. That's where I am from. So before we even get to start on the subject, I have to say something very important. Allah works in mysterious ways. I learned that from you.
Yes.
So Allah leads astray whom He will, and He guides whom He will. So it may look to you like it is Jerusalem, when in reality it is Mecca. And Allah made it look like 100% Jerusalem and 0 Mecca, so He can use this information to mislead all of you and lead you astray. Amen?
It might be, Usama, but you will see that Allah left clues in His own divine writing that it cannot be Mecca.
Praise be to Allah that He left us these clues.
Yeah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
Smash Allah. So yeah, that sounds, Odon, what you explained to us just before we came live, that sounds really interesting. And hopefully you can explain that to the audience in a moment. But hello, Paul, very welcome. Glad to have you here. Your perspectives, your information has been fantastic. So please say hello and tell us your thoughts.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And what is your take on all of this so far? Because it was when Mal introduced you to the world, I think on YouTube, that the Jerusalem Thesis, became a term that was popularized. So just tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Well, it's been quite a while now. When was this? It's maybe 7 years ago or something like that. It might have been around 2020, 2019. And I went to a conference in London, which was organized by, I think, Gabriel Said Reynolds was there. I was actually sitting 2 seats down from Stephen Shoemaker. So there were some quite big names there. And that was my first real exposure to the academic side of Islam. I was interested, but didn't really know very much about it. And I became absolutely enthralled by the mystery, by trying to work out what the Quran is all about, what it says, what its true meaning is. It became apparent from the first half hour that the traditional Islamic narrative is way, way off the mark. But the Quran has meaning. I've never looked at any part of it or read a book or article that's had no value, that has no insight. And there's a lot of depth there. So I became quite caught up in that. Then I came up with the idea that it was Jerusalem. It sounded like Jerusalem. And as I think I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, I read a book by Daniel Beck called The Evolution of the Early Quran and Stephen Shoemaker's Death of a Prophet. And it became absolutely clear to me that it was Jerusalem. So bubbling up with excitement, and I wanted to share this news with the world. I made a comment on one of Mel's videos, and Mel asked me if I wanted to come on and explain it a bit more. So I did, and there we are. I've been working on this ever since.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, and JC, you're all the way here from Guadalajara, Chihuahua, in Mexico. So thank you for joining us.
Andale, I'm happy to be here. Hello, everyone. So yes, I'm excited to see to see how all of these pieces are being put together. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, Lloyd had this show showing the statistical analysis of the Quran, showing that there is nothing to do with pagans in there. They're all biblical accounts and so on. So it's like, okay, we take that to the next level. What happens now? Odon has shown that the descriptions that are exegeted as being about Mecca, they are not Mecca. So the next question, what city is it? So I'm really looking forward to seeing all of these parallels with Jerusalem, which it seems to be the most fitting candidate at present. It's certainly not Mecca.
Agreed. So Odon, yeah, that what you were telling us just before we went live, you were talking about some of the issues with Abraham and other sort of things. Can you just use that as an introduction again, or just something, just sum that up again? Because I think it was really fascinating. It does make good sense.
The bulk of the presentation is about identifying and explaining all the mentions within the Quran, the mentions to Bayt, al-Bayt, temple, or Masjid al-Haram, the sacred sanctuary, or the place of Abraham.
Haram is forbidden, right? And if you think of Jewish temples, you were forbidden to enter the inner sanctuary, which is not termed Haram, where they usually
actually, when you look at all the descriptions of such things that are supposed to refer to Mecca within the Quran, you come to realize that they also could very well refer to Jerusalem. And actually, for most of them, actually for all of them, they are much more meaningful when referring to Jerusalem than to Mecca. When we look at the descriptions, the explanations of the Islamic narrative, sometimes they are very far-fetched, they are very odd. Whereas if you have Jerusalem in mind, everything is clear. The Quran seems coherent. It doesn't need explanations and stories and hadiths and so on. So in the end, we come to two hypotheses. Either the Quran describes two cities that had the exact same characteristics in the 7th century, so Jerusalem and Mecca, which both had a temple, which both were the place of Abraham and so on, or the Quran speaks of Jerusalem and it doesn't speak at all about Mecca.
Right, agreed. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the Meccan narrative, as stated in the Quran, cannot be true. So it's clearly there's something else going on. So yeah. So what are we talking about
with Mecca is that, as we already said in our previous installments, in our previous streams, we have no evidence for Mecca before Islam. Absolutely no trace in ancient sources or archaeology. Really, it's a sort of black hole. So we have to come to the conclusion that the first evidence for Mecca is the Quran itself.
Right.
And when you discard the Quran as evidence for Mecca, what's left for the Meccan narrative? Nothing.
You know what's amazing? Yeah, what's amazing that in the Quran it teach or make fun of the Christian, Quran 4:171. Oh, people of the book, do not exaggerate in your religion. And that's exactly what Muslims have done. All the years of my life, as a little boy, grew up in Egypt until I finished college, a couple of years in college actually, where I studied Sharia, Islamic law. We know that Mecca is a very important city. It is very central for the travelers who go to the North Strips and the South Strip. I mean, people go there to get food, to get water, to get all their need for the rest of their trip. I mean, they made Mecca like LA airport or maybe New York airport. I mean, maybe Chicago airport. You know what I'm saying? Very important. Without it, life will not move an inch in the Middle East. And then now I found out the place was not there. So they exaggerate too much to the point that they become so ridiculous in their exaggeration. Anyway, go ahead, bro.
Yeah. I wanted to, when we did this talk a couple of weeks ago on the channel, statistically, when you do an analysis, and these were just four books of the Bible, and you can go to all of them, you've got people, Jews and Christians, early Christians, who are in a Christian or Jewish context, and they're also dealing with pagans, and they're dealing with enemies and friends alike. And they mention specifics, names, dates, places, and so on, at least, or identifiable timeframes, right? You're dealing with names, you're dealing with places, events, and so on. And you can see the statistical distribution in terms of what is pagan, right? Or non-Jewish, non-Christian, and what is Jewish and Christian. And you see great deal. There's hundreds of names, there's hundreds of places that are identified. In the Quran, you have extreme vagueness, but notice only 4% of the Quran, 8 characters that we can identify that deal with non-biblical people. Supposedly historical people of whom we can only identify basically Dhul Qarnayn, Alexander the Great, and the rest is purely 96% is references to biblical characters. The Quran is talking exclusively in a Jewish and early Christian context, which is really strange. And they're supposed to be a book that is for pagans, and it's trying to bring this message to these pagans, but you see almost zero pagans here. Very odd. And then also the same, if you look at early history of Arabia, you can find references to going back 3,000 years and more to early pagans, to the various tribes from Yemen and Oman and so on. You can find references between the Greeks, the Romans, even in India and so on, of all of these places. And these famous Meccans, literally nothing. So it's very odd. Any comments before we switch back to Odon?
I think, according to this study here, it's supposed to be the opposite, or at least 50-50. Imagine Muhammad is a final prophet. He came to follow the Bible prophets. Give me half, and then show me your people whom you're ministered to, whom you were sent to, and give me 50-50, 50 green and 50% blue. No, as you see it, it makes no sense.
Yeah, it's arguing, as Odon has mentioned, the Quran is arguing theology with a Jewish and a Jewish Christian audience.
There's another oddity here. So it's with this calculation, we know that the audience is Judeo-Christian, Jewish or Christian. But according to the Islamic narrative, these Christians and Jews lived mostly in Medina or in Mecca. But we have no trace of Christianity in Mecca. And we have no trace either of Jews in Medina. I mean rabbinic Jews, because the rabbinic authorities from the 7th centuries and after, they took a very scrupulous account of the Jewish populations in the Middle East and elsewhere. And nowhere is there a mention of a Jewish community in Yathrib, Medina. So it's very strange, because you see the Jews and Christians.
But Yathrib is actually a Jewish community just north of Baghdad. Yathrib is a city north of Baghdad, and there were Jews in and around Baghdad.
Yeah.
Man. So how about Bani Qurayza? How about Bani Nadir? What happened to these tribes, the Jewish tribe near Mecca?
Monkeys. They turned into monkeys, and they just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will just add that based on this data, seeing as everything is about biblical characters and so on, nothing to do with pagans, if we were to extrapolate this data to the rest of the book, what we would expect is the same cities that appear in the Bible to be the cities being discussed in the Quran, because the characters discussed are the biblical characters and so on. If the Quran was very clearly all about pagans, then we would expect the cities from pagan cities and stuff. But this analysis that you showed is all about biblical characters. Therefore, we would expect places that we already know from the Bible.
Yeah. And look, this is focused on the New Testament. It's arguing Christian and Jewish theology with Christians and Jews, quote unquote, right? and very little discussion of pagans trying to convert pagans. It's arguing biblical theology with biblical people. And then, of course, if you look at the word cloud, I mean, yeah, I'm missing all of the pagan stuff here. This is all, I mean, all of the word clouds, you see Jesus is the main character, you barely see Muhammad, and then you see biblical characters. So yeah, Odon, over to you. Do you want to share anything and or any comments on this before we move on? Because there's a statistical anomaly here. There's a serious statistical anomaly within the Quran.
Yeah. You're right, Lloyd. Yeah, there is something wrong here, but let's jump in the presentation.
Sure.
Put my yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, so yeah, this is the Mecca question. This is let me get to the point.
Yeah, no
this
worries.
is all we talked about in previous streams. So here, this is what we will be talking about. We talked about Meccans being farmers and fishermen, and just before we go into the study of God's temple and so on, just a quick remark on a very odd verse of the Quran that seems to picture the Meccans as dwelling around the Dead Sea. This one. There is a sort of mention of the pillars of Lot in the Quran. In Surah 37, verse 133 to 137, there is this thing about the story of Lot, the biblical character Lot. Indeed, Lot was among the messenger. We saved him and his family from the destruction of Sodom, except his wife, among those who remain with the evildoer. Then we destroyed the others, and indeed, you pass by them in the morning and at night. And I took it from Patricia Krone, but I think every Islamologist agree that this is a mention of the traditional pillars of Lot, which are near the Dead Sea. You can see here the location of supposedly Mount Sodom, and there are some pillars, earth pillars like this one or this one, that traditionally have been named pillars of Lot or Lot's wife, because in the biblical story, wife's Lot was changed into a statue of salt, a salt statue. And so that the tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition around these places, named them Lot's Pillar. So I found several of them, but they are all around the Mount Sodom in the south of the Dead Sea. And beside the Dead Sea in Arabic, it's also commonly called the Sea of Lot or the Lake of Lot. So it's something here very strange. This verse that I showed you, this one, is supposed to have been proclaimed by Muhammad to Meccans. And the Meccans he spoke to passed by the pillars of Lot in the morning and at night. So it's an interesting verse because it shows us that it did not happen in Mecca. But it shows us that it did not happen in a unique place, I think. We will talk about Jerusalem.
If I could just, before we leave there,
yeah.
Hi, Lot. Hi, Odon.
I'm not leaving yet. But, go on, Paul.
Yeah. Yes, if anyone were to say, well, this is a modern thing, these two pillars are referred to by Josephus. By Flavius Josephus in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews. So it was well known. That was in the 1st century. So it was well known by the time of Muhammad that these items were these features were known as Lot's wife, because Josephus mentions, I went and saw them. So there was. So it's an ancient tradition.
Yeah, it's an ancient tradition, and the fact that this is mentioned in the Quran shows us that some events happened around the Dead Sea. Not all of the Quran, because we will see that some of the Quran refers to Jerusalem, but some also refers to the Dead Sea. And we saw last time that Meccans, supposedly Meccans, are described as farmers or fishermen. So these farmers and fishermen, they were in other places. Patricia Krohn thought about the shores of Syria. We saw also that the fishermen could have been in Bahrain. So what this verses tell us that there is no unique place where there is no Mecca. Actually, there is no unique place of origins. There is no place where the Quran was proclaimed. No unique place, or even a dual place, Mecca and Medina. The Quran was proclaimed around the Dead Sea, maybe in Syria, in Jerusalem, in Arabia also, maybe in Petra. Petra is not very far from the Dead Sea. Let me point here in the map. It's here, Petra. So this bit of the presentation is just to warn us that we should not look at the Quran with an Islamic lens, believing that there is a unique place of origins for Islam and the Quran. And it will be evident with the work that has been done on Jerusalem in the Quran. So let's get to it. What I've done is based on the work that has been previously done by Edouard Marie-Gallet, is looking at every mention in the Quran of some key words or key expressions. The first are the one who refer to God's temple, namely Al-Bayt and Masjid al-Haram in the Quran. Bayt is an Arabic word. There are 65 occurrences of the word in the Quran. 16 of these occurrences refer to a temple as a unique house of God. And other occurrences, of course, refer to house, Bayt as being a house. Because the basic meaning of Bayt is house. And by extension, the house of God means the house of God, so a temple. And we find expression referring to a house of God, such as Al-Bayt, the temple, the house, Bayt al-Haram, the sacred temple, Baytiya, which is my temple, when God speaks of his own temple in the Quran. Bayt al-Atiq is the ancient temple. We can make a connection with the Hebrew and Aramaic expression Bayt, which is exactly the same. Bayt in Hebrew and Aramaic means house, and it means also, because it means house, it means temple, and the temple of Jerusalem. When you look at the Bible, the temple of Jerusalem is commonly referred to as Bayt. There is an interesting remark, because we have the same in Arabic. In Hebrew and Aramaic, you can use Bayt to say a house of something. For example, Bayt Rome is the house of Rome. So it means the territories of Rome. It means Rome. Bayt Yonai is Greece. Bayt Din is the house of religion, the house of judgment. And nowadays it is a rabbinical court. But the equivalent in Arabic is not exactly the same, because in Arabic, at least within the Quran, the equivalent will be al-Kitab, the house of the book. It's not the house actually. Al, it doesn't mean the people. It means basically it means the tent. So the tent of the book becomes all the people that are within a tent. They are a sort of a household, house, and so the house of the book. So you see the equivalent
as in a tent, as in like under an umbrella. Everyone who falls under an umbrella.
The tent, as in a Bedouin and nomad anthropology, an Arab anthropology.
Yeah.
Within
By
an
the way,
Arab mind.
just to let everyone know something for a second, you can't really see this, but on my phone, I get routinely. This is a sign-in request. It just came in. It's the second one now in the last 5 minutes. This is an authentication request for access to my Microsoft account, and I get this like typically.
This may be one of my cousins. Listen, my cousins are trying to get in touch with your computer.
Well, one night I had 30 of these requests in a 3-hour period. I typically get now about 3 a day, right? People trying to log into my account. I get them on various accounts. So I will get these authentication requests to authenticate a login. So whoever's trying, it's like, look, man, I have all the security possible, but it's just that whatever we're doing seems to be upsetting people, and they are constantly trying to hack my accounts. So I get tons of notifications.
Ask them to send them to me. I will give them my account anytime.
Yeah. So
my
just but there's a price to be paid for this. These people are desperately trying to hack my account. I mean, it's twice now in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. Anyway, I did this remark on a house of something and al, because there is something very strange in the Quran and in the Islamic tradition. There is this expression al-bayt, the people of the bayt, the people of the house. And they are supposed to be the relatives and close companions of Muhammad. But when you look at the etymology of the word, al doesn't mean house. It means tent. And bayt means house. Yeah. So it is a very, very odd Arabic expression, al-bayt, because it means house of the household. And I think al-bayt refer to al-temple, the people of the temple. The one that had a devotion, the ones that had a devotion to the temple. But it's just a remark. Let's continue on our study here. The word masjid, what does it mean? It comes from the verb sajada, which means to prostrate, to bow down. So a masjid is a place where one prostrates or bows down. So it's a place of prostration, a place of adoration, a place of worship. It's not a mosque per se. Christians had masjid at the time because they used to prostrate in their churches. A church, an Arab church could be named a masjid. And this is the root or the basis for the English word mosque. So there are 28 occurrences of the masjid word in the Quran, and there are 13 as masjid al-haram. Haram means forbidden or unlawful.
Masjid haram.
Murad, our friend Murad, he had an explanation, interesting explanation on the meaning of the word. He said that, I think if I remember well, haram means, originally meant tied, something that has been tied. And the contrary, halal, meant something that has been untied. I think so. I should have these. I should have a look at this translation. Anyway, a derived meaning of forbidden or unlawful is sacred, because it is forbidden. It is a sort of taboo in an ancient meaning. So a Masjid al-Haram could be understood as referring to a place of prostration that is forbidden. The usual interpretation within the Islamic narrative is that it is a sacred mosque, referring to the sanctuary around the Kaaba in Mecca, but it can also be understood as any place of prostration that would be forbidden to the believers.
Well, actually, it's not just forbidden for them to be there. If I remember exactly from the years of studying in Egypt, it is forbidden to kill in it. That's why you see a specific verse in the Quran: do not kill them at the forbidden mosque unless they start the war, unless they start the fight. Then you can find them there. So forbidden, because we also have forbidden months. Well, what is forbidden months? These are 4 months every year where Muslim cannot fight, or Arab, actually, before Islam, Arab do not fight. It was a peaceful months. So forbidden months, forbidden mosque, a time where you cannot fight, and a place where you cannot fight. And then Allah gave Quran 5, which said, after the forbidden months are passed.
Yeah, but that was the practice of the Sabaeans. Prior to the Muslims, the Sabaeans had that practice of the 4 forbidden months and the place.
Sure.
This is a practice they got from the, moon worshipping pagan Sabaeans. If I can just share something for a moment, this is from the Brill Encyclopedia of Islam, Al-Bayt. Literally the people of the house, the family of the Prophet, but the term has been interpreted variously, it says. So in other words, it has changed and adapted to suit whatever purpose, right? The current Orthodox view is based on a harmonizing opinion. So the word has obviously had connotations and meanings that were not suitable to the Islamic narrative. And if you go down here, Al-Kitab, the people of the book, Jews and Christians, but later extended to Sabaeans and Zoroastrians, and in India, even to idolaters. So yeah, these guys are not very, shall we say, very strict. It tends to be a little bit flexible.
I just put it there because it is one of the hypotheses of my book. The Islamic tradition refers to the massacre of Al-Bayt, which happened, which were made by the Umayyads. And so, supposedly, according to the holy history of Islam, the Umayyads massacred the relatives of the prophets, something around 660, so between 660 and 690. And it's very, very strange. Why would the rightfully successors of Muhammad massacre his relatives? This is very odd. I think it does not refer to the massacre of the relatives of Muhammad, but to the ones who had a devotion to the temple in Jerusalem. And it's a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. When you look at Islam actual history, it was all about rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem and waiting for the Messiah to come and for the messianic times to be triggered by his return. And since the Messiah did not come, some of the Arab leaders took it upon themselves to do as the Messiah would do, or to pretend to be the Messiah. And there were factions who were still a devotion to the temple and who were still waiting for the real Messiah, Jesus, to come. And there were fights between these factions and the others. And I think the Islamic tradition gives us an account of this fight, but it distorted the reality of it. It changes the meaning of the expression in order to hide its real history. Well, it's just a remark.
No, I think Odon, you're absolutely on the money there. because the supposed massacre of Hussein was the
Hussein, Hassan, and Ali
was it
also,
Hassan?
and all the wives. And
Hassan or Hussein? I thought it was Hussein, but it was supposedly traditionally that started the second, what is referred to as the second fitna, the second civil war amongst the Muslims, and the course of this war, which is doesn't really make sense on a military analysis. It doesn't really make sense if it's down in Mecca, but somehow it all seems to be tied up with Jerusalem, because the eventual winner of the war was Abdul Malik, and he immediately started building the Dome of the Rock and the buildings up there, even before the fighting had fully stopped. So you wouldn't do that if everyone was arguing about Mecca. You wouldn't celebrate your victory or your anticipated victory by starting to build a great monument in what for them would have been the wrong place on the traditional narrative. The traditional story is, Abdul Malik didn't have access to Mecca because of the war, and so he built the Dome of the Rock to create an alternative site. But that doesn't really make sense, because he started building it at the very end of the war.
And besides, when Abdul Malik built its Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, it replaced a former building, because we have sources, different and independent sources, explaining how a building was built on the Temple Mount by an alliance of Arabs and Jews when they took over Jerusalem around 638. We have a Frankish witness who saw the building in 670. His name is Arculf in French, Arculfus maybe in Latin, and he described that there was a sort of temple on the Temple Mount, a quadrangular temple, so a sort of cube, a Kaaba maybe, in this time, and that it was built with wood and marble, and thousands of worshippers could worship in it. So what Abdul Malik did, he massacred the people of the temple. And as soon, or even before having finished it, he destroyed the temple on the Temple Mount and built something else in its place. Like it's like he was celebrating his victory on the people of the temple by showing them, I have destroyed your temple and rebuilt my own temple in its place. So you have completely lost.
That's absolutely fascinating, Odon. I think you're absolutely on the money there. But by the way, I have another observation to make about haram. If you have a moment, in the Old Testament, and we've talked about, and I no doubt Odon will talk some more about how saturated the Quran is with stories from the Bible, characters from the Bible, themes from the Bible, even expressions from the Bible. So the Quran is very biblically rooted. Mm-hmm. In the Bible, the Hebrew word herem has a very specific meaning. When the Israelites were occupying Canaan, Yahweh would declare particular cities, normally, sometimes lands, but they would generally be described as cities, as being harem. And if Yahweh imposes a harem on a place, that meant that the Israelites were obliged to purify it completely, often violently, from any form of paganism. This is often associated with, or interpreted as great cruelty on behalf of the Israelites. But the point should be made that it's depicted as though the Israelites are actually sacrificing something themselves. They would have had the opportunity to seize cattle or other forms of livestock. They would have had the opportunity to capture slaves or prisoners that they might have ransomed or used as slave labor, but they weren't allowed to. If Yahweh imposed a harem on a city, the obligation was to purify it in its entirety. And of course, King Saul didn't comply with one and ended up losing his kingdom on the basis of that. Well, it seems to me that that's very similar to what the position that the Quran reaches in Surah Al-Baqarah and also Surah Al-Hajj, where it commands the believers to go and seize the Masjid al-Haram and uses the phrase in at least one of those to purify it. And then later on you have all the jihad, the war verses, which I would say are all about Jerusalem. And I would say that it's not possible that the Quran's author or authors could have used the phrase Masjid al-Haram, knowing of their familiarity with the Bible, and not have realized that they are using the word that's basically a cognate of harem, and wouldn't have known the association that they were making with that. As a final point on this, perhaps the most famous harem of the Bible is that around the city of Jericho. And how did the Israelites gain victory over Jericho? How did they enforce the harem? They did it by marching around the city, the perimeter of the city of Jericho for 7 days, which is remarkably similar to how the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, how Muslims mark that to this day.
Well, related to what Paul just said, if you look at the word Hanif, we know it comes from the Syriac Hanpe, or pagan, right? And the history associated with that seems to be that they were, just like Christians were called Christians as an insult, right? Followers of Christ as an insult. And the Christians said, you know what, we'll take it. You know, we like it. Actually, that's true. We'll accept it. The word Hanpe, the Jews were calling this group pagans, right? Hanif. And the Muslims accepted and adopted the word Hanif, saying, yeah, that's what we are. That's what we believe. So I think a very similar thing happened. So very similar to what you've just said. So they said, yeah, we are. This is harem. Yeah, we are. This is the good thing. So they were trying to invert the meaning. And I'd say, but actually, you guys are wrong. The opposite is true. So I think there's an argument to be made there. I see Usama nodding his head.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. In agreement with you, absolutely.
No, Paul's points are very relevant. The Masjid al-Haram that is described in the Quran, I think it refers to Jerusalem, of course. And at the time, Jerusalem was ruled by associationists, the mushrikun that are described in the Quran. So they are not pagans, but they are vile believers. And it's a sort of analogy to the biblical stories of when God orders the Israelites to purify cities from the heathens or the vile believers.
Yeah,
it's sort of the same with Jerusalem. Jerusalem is to be purified by the believers, the believers of the Quran, of their associationists. So there is another connection here with Jerusalem.
And needless to say, Mount Jabus, which is where Jerusalem was built by King David, Mount Jabus was one of the places that was subject to a harem, and all of the harems that are referred to in the Bible are naturally all in Canaan. They're all within the Promised Land. So there was no harem down in the Arabian Peninsula. Could not have been. That would have needed something
Yeah,
completely out of kilter with how the term is used within the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, was for many years when I read this verse in the Quran about Muhammad turning his face, or whoever is talking there, obviously, towards that Masjid al-Haram. Well, there was no masjid, there was no building, there was no mosque, there was no forbidden or secret mosque built in Muhammad days in there. But if you talk about the Kaaba is not a masjid. Muslims say, well, it's a place to worship. No, he's talking about a place. He's talking about a building. So it doesn't make any sense. How can he turn his face towards a building? It does not exist.
Yeah. Actually,
Well, it was
very
taken
right.
on a night journey to a building that didn't exist. Remember?
Yeah, oh, that's another made up story.
Lots of ghost buildings around the place. By the looks of it.
Maybe, yeah. And he tie his mule on one of the pillar of the Masjid al-Haram, and the pillars were gone since 70 AD. I don't know what pillar he was talking about.
Yeah, you are very right, Usama. I never thought of it this way. There was no masjid in Muslim Mecca, or in pre-Islamic Mecca, according to the Islamic narrative. There was no building where people bowed down, or no space. Actually, the kind of worship that the supposedly pagans, Meccan pagans did was a circumambulate around the Kaaba, and they did sacrifices. I don't think they bowed down.
Yeah.
So it was no masjid in itself.
I think that most of the academic opinion is that the word masjid, which comes from the verb with the root sjd, or however that would be pronounced in Arabic, is originally in the Quran's time meant something that you prostrate towards, whereas now, of course, the term mosque is generally understood as a building that one prostrates within. But back in the day, it was something that was used in relation to, altars and
direction to
and particular locations, rather than a congregational prayer hall.
But Brother Paul, we have a problem. There were no mosque, there was no masjid, there was no building in Mecca nor in Jerusalem. So how can Muhammad was back and forth between two places to pray towards when there was no building in either one?
Mm-hmm.
And then
No,
later,
there was still a place in Jerusalem. The temple might have been destroyed. Both temples have been destroyed, but the foundation stone was still there. So you could still visit the foundation stone, and you could still say, this is the place that we should pray towards.
Yeah,
but there was nowhere to tie up your horse. So
I got your point, but later when we studied some of the early mosques which were built, they were actually facing Petra. They're not facing Mecca.
And they originally faced Jerusalem. They admit that in the Quran. It faced Jerusalem.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we will see when we look at the Quran, all these mentions, which I did here for the Beit, the 16 occurrences of the Beit as a unique place of worship, and here as the Masjid al-Haram, we see a connection between the two. The Beit and the Masjid al-Haram are in the same place. Let me look at the occurrences. Okay, let's just assume that they are in the same place, and also in the same place as the standing place of Abraham, which is a third expression that is closely linked to Al-Bayt and Masjid al-Haram. The standing place, his name of Abraham it's Makam Ibrahim, in Arabic. It's a place where Abraham stood, literally. But if we look at the Kawamim root, which means to stand, which has many occurrences in the Quranic text, there are some derived meaning of the expression. It means to stand, but it means also it can mean to stand for, and to defend. And you can also stand before God, stand firm before God, to stand in prayer before God, to be judged before by doing so. And so the place where Abraham stood, the Arabic expression Makam Ibrahim, it's also the place where Abraham stood before God. He was put to trial before God, and it obviously refers to the episode when God asked him to sacrifice his son. So in the Bible, it's Isaac. In the Islamic narrative, it's Ishmael.
No, even brother, even the Islamic narrative, Quran 39, 100, though whatever number of verses there, it's still Isaac. It's not. It was never Ishmael.
I agree.
Even in the Quran.
I agree. It's just within the narrative. The Quranic text hints at Isaac and rather than Ishmael. So the expression Makam Ibrahim, it's not just a place where Abraham might have been once in his life, or I don't know, a place where he slept or where he ate. No, it's the place of the attempted sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, Odi, I'd like to share a little bit about Maqam Ibrahim. I learned that from Brother Yusuf. That there is, when you build a house and the wall get a little bit higher, so you put a scaffold, something that you can stand on it and you can keep building up higher. Well, that is what the narratives in Islam concerning the word Maqam Ibrahim, the place where Abraham stood, that he put a rock, he stood on top of it, so he can get the next rock to build the next layer. And there is one there near Mecca. If you look at the Kaaba, you can see a separate building by itself a little bit to the right. It was closer and they moved it a little bit away because it was just distracting the people from prayer. They think about, oh, Abraham stood there. So they put a little bit to the side. And there's a piece of rock there. And where Abraham stood, he have a little bit brushed by his feet and make like a foot mark. That's it, exactly. So my friend Yusuf,
look at how far away it is. How could he be standing here?
Because it is Omar moved it or somebody else moved it. But my friend Yusuf said he went there with his family to visit when he was a Muslim, he was a boy. And he asked her dad, he said, Dad, there's 1 foot mark on that rock. Where is the second foot? And his daddy slapped him. How dare are you to even question this truth we believe in? So it's just a joke. It's just a comedy. Anyway.
We talked about it with him in a previous stream. I think it was the first of the series.
That's awesome, yeah.
But my point here is that the Makam Ibrahim is not just any place. It's a place of the sacrifice.
Sure.
And there are other occurrences of the verb karma, like I wrote in the PowerPoint, and they don't refer to the standing place of Abraham. They refer to the prayer. You stand up in prayer. They refer to the establishment. For example, in 597, God has made the Kaaba, the sacred house, standing. Actually, it's not a verb here. It's kiyaman, an establishment, which is a name based on the root kaf wa mim, and it's also understood as a gathering place for the judgment. In other translations, in French translation, it is translated as a lieu de rassemblement, gathering place for the people. Gathering place meaning this is the place where they would be gathered to be judged at the end of times. So it's also a very interesting word. And the expression Makam Ibrahim is a bit rare, scarce. In the Quran, there are only 2 occurrences here. And we made the temple a place of return for mankind and security, and said, take the standing place, the Makam Ibrahim, as a place of prayer. And surely, in this other verse, in Surah 2, 96, 97, surely the first temple laid down for the people was indeed that at Mecca, a blessed house and a guidance for the world. In it are clear sign, Makam Ibrahim. And some other uses of this root could also refer to or point to the place of Abraham. The thing here that is very interesting is everything is connected. You see how in the same place we have the temple, the place of Abraham, and Masjid al-Haram, and also Mecca, which is another expression we will explain. If we look at every mention in the Quran, there are 2 literal mention, Makam Ibrahim, and like I said, other mentions that refer to this place or seem to refer to this place. And what is very, very odd is this mention of clear signs at the standing place of Abraham. In it are clear, in Surah 3, verse 97, here, in it are clear signs, the Makam Ibrahim, and whoever enters it is safe. So the question here is, what are these signs? Are they the footprints of Abraham, such as they are supposedly presented in Mecca? We can see here the trace of the toes, maybe. So and Lloyd showed us many pictures of these things, but there is another explanation for the expression clear sign. Let me jump into it. If you look at the expression clear signs, ayatun bayinatun, it is either understood as clear signs or also as clear verses within the Quran, because the word ayah can mean either sign, a miracle or a sign. It can also mean a verse. And in other occurrences, the one I showed here, like in Surah 24, in Surah 26, in Surah 27, Surah 28, the very same expression, ayatun bayinatun, is understood as clear verses and not clear signs. So it could be that the clear signs that are mentioned here, in it are clear signs. It's not about a sign, it's not about signs like footprints, but verses. And what could be those verses? If you look at the holy texts of the time in the 7th century, the kitab that is mentioned in the Quran, I think it refers to the Torah. And within the Torah, in Genesis, the book of Genesis, there is the description of God's commandments to Abraham when he asked him to sacrifice his son. And you know the verse, it's Genesis 22, verse 2, take your son, God said, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you. When they arrive at the place God had designated, Abraham built the altar, arranged the wood, and so on. So here we have clear verses mentioning the place of Abraham. It's in the land of Moriah on the Temple Mount, and it is the place where Abraham built the altar. And in the Jewish tradition, this is the place where Jerusalem was built. Jerusalem was built around this place because of this. We have another mention, another clear verse in Chronicles, 2 Chronicles. Then Solomon began to build the temple of Yahweh, Yahweh, in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. This was the place. In Hebrew, it is the same word, almost the same word. It's makom, not makam, but makom. This was the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So here are two clear verses of describing the place, the standing place of Abraham, as being the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. So what about then? Should Maqam Ibrahim be in Jerusalem? It would mean that the Masjid al-Haram and the Beit would be also in Jerusalem because they are connected. The Quran tells us that they are in the same place. So it would mean that everything is in Jerusalem, that the Masjid al-Haram is the Temple Mount, the Beit is the Temple of Jerusalem, and it's a very interesting discovery. It is the basis for the Jerusalem Thesis. But it's not only this expression. We have also many other expression within the Quran that refer to Jerusalem also.
Perhaps just before we leave the Maqam, the Genesis chapter 22 uses the Hebrew word, the cognate of the Arabic, which is makom, isn't it? Mm-hmm. To mean place, and it uses it 4 times in chapter 22. Now you could say, one could argue, well, it's a fairly ordinary word, the word place, and so it's not entirely surprising if one particular chapter mentions it 2 or 3 times. But the word seems quite prominent, makom, within the story of Abraham going up Mount Moriah, including 2 phrases where it talks about the makom as the place that Yahweh had shown him. So this phrase, he went to the place that Yahweh had shown him, and then a little bit later, as he was walking towards a place that Yahweh had shown him, and you got this repetition. So the word makom is used, I would say, with a particular prominence in Genesis chapter 22. And anybody who spoke Arabic and who also spoke Hebrew, so for example, I guess any Jews of Yathrib, or any Jews who are listening to Muhammad, they would have picked up that it's the same word, and when they talk about the Maqam Ibrahim, they would know full well that it was the Maqam that Ibrahim was led to. Abraham was led to.
You're right, Paul. I was a bit quick on telling that it is the exact same expression in Arabic and in Hebrew. When I underline this, the Makom Hebrew expression, it has the same meaning. It is the place where Abraham was put to the test, was put to trial by God, where God asked him to sacrifice his son. And it is also very important in Jewish and also Christian theology. God asked his people to gather in a specific place, Jerusalem. And I think this is why there is such an emphasis on the word Makom in Genesis and elsewhere in the Bible. It's very important that there is a place of sacrifice, a unique place of worship. And I think this is what the Jewish instructors of Muhammad explained him, and this is why we have this in the Quran.
I mean, why would you have this book arguing with other loosely spoken biblical Christians and Jews, Jewish Christians, about biblical theology? Why is this book that supposedly is a revelation to the pagans of Mecca not using pagan descriptions and pagan discussions and talking about all the pagan gods and having a dialogue in that sense? Because that's what the book is supposedly, that's what its narrative is. But it's obviously not that, but it's borrowing so much from the Bible and from Northern Levant ideas for the most part, rather than actually dealing with its local context. I mean, it's clearly like dealing with biblical ideas arguing with another biblical audience that knows, and it assumes they know these things, because it never tells the biblical story. It alludes to it. It assumes that you know the context. It just jumps around at almost random. So, I mean, where are we seeing the discussion of, where the names, the places, the events, the gods of the pagans that it's supposedly engaging with? It's supposed to be engaging with these pagans. It's completely absent.
Yeah, it's a good point, Lloyd. If you look at the Islamic narrative, the Quran is supposed to correct the Bible. So the Quran would have been sent in order to correct the location of the place of Abraham.
But I thought it was sent to
believe. Yeah, why tell it to pagans? I agree. It's very very odd. But the idea within the Islamic narrative is that the Jews and the Christians had it wrong. The standing place of Abraham was not in Jerusalem. Of course, it was in Mecca. But if you look at the text, if you look at the Quran, and this is what is completely unbelievable, the Quran acknowledges Jerusalem as the place of Abraham. There are odd verses, very bizarre verses, that seems to legitimate the temple of Jerusalem. There are mentions of the mihrab. Mihrab meaning the sanctuary. There are four mentions actually, of the mihrab. So the temple of Jerusalem. In Surah 3, verse 37 to 39, it's about Zachariah and Miriam, who were in the sanctuary in Jerusalem. In Surah 19:11, Zachariah, so according to the Islamic narrative, is an Islamic prophet. He dwelled in Jerusalem's temple, in the sanctuary. And there is also a mention in Surah 38 of the mihrab, but it does not refer to the temple of Jerusalem. I think it refers to the tent of David, because it's a verse about David having to deal with robbers that climbed over the wall of his sanctuary. Yeah,
brother, it can be at the mihrab, the Holy of Holies, because the Muslims do not know, or the scholars of Islam do not know, that it's only the high priest to go inside there. For they actually tell us that David was there before when he tested.
When I use the word sanctuary as a translation for mihrab, it's not about the Holy of Holies. That's
not no, because you're saying the right way.
But the temple as the whole complex of the temple, the whole facility of the temple, because Zachary and Mary, they were not living inside the holy or the Holy of Holies.
Yes, she was. See, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You are speaking right, but Muslim got it wrong. They actually believe Mary was up in that mihrab, the holy of holies, and that when Zechariah used to check on her, he used to put the ladder outside that room and go up the ladder to look through the window to check on her. So if you look at the
here,
detail,
it's an expression when I don't know the English word for it, but you take a word that refers to something specific within something bigger, and this word you use it to refer to the biggest thing.
not in the
and
mind, not
say,
in
for
the
example,
mind of the scholars. No, the scholars of Islam assure us that we're talking about the holy of holiness. David went inside it when he was tested, and he saw the golden bird, and the baby Mary was living in it when
it could not have been. But even within this hypothesis,
yeah,
what does it mean? It means that the Quran acknowledged that there was a temple in Jerusalem, that there was a sanctuary, that it was holy, that a prophet of Islam, such as Zachariah, and a very high-ranked person within Islam, such as Maryam, they lived there, and so they did not oppose the Jewish tradition of the place of Abraham being the reason why the temple had been built in Jerusalem. Should Zachariah and Maryam have been Islamic figures, they would have denounced the false tradition of the place of Abraham being in Jerusalem, which is the reason why the temple was built there. They would have said, no, this is not the right place for the place of Abraham. The whole temple is built on false premises because the real right place of Abraham is in Mecca. Hey, he was an Islamic prophet, a prophet of Islam, so he knew better. He should have known better. The thing here, what these verses tell us, is that at the time of the Quranic proclamation, there was no notion of a place of Abraham in Mecca. Everything was about Jerusalem. But when the Quran was reinterpreted, when Mecca was invented afterwards, centuries after maybe, they had to deal with these verses. They are a blatant contradiction of the Islamic tradition of the place of Abraham being in Mecca. Won't you agree, Usama, and all of you?
Yeah,
absolutely. Your pagan down in Mecca may possibly be interested in the stories of Saul and David and Solomon and Moses. I might possibly have been interested in them, and Jesus. But would such a person have been particularly interested in where Jesus's mother had grown up and spent her childhood? They would say, well, what? Even if it's true, what's that got to do with me? But once one realizes the significance of the story, which I'm not sure if you're going to go on to, Odon, it all becomes clear why the Quran includes it. And that was because why did the story get about that Mary was raised in the temple? And that is because, are you going to go on to this, Odon, or would you like me to finish the sentence?
I don't know what you're going to say.
The reason that Mary is said to have been raised in the temple is because this was a Christian pious legend, is where I'd probably put it, at that time. There's nothing in the Bible that suggests that Mary was raised in the temple. She's a Zechariah is a relative of hers, but there's nothing to say that she was raised at the temple. But this was a story that was included in the proto-evangelium of James. And it's, as I say, it's a pious legend, but the significance of the legend is that Mary was staying at the same building, whether or not in the same room, where the Ark of the Covenant had formerly been kept, and the place where Abraham had been tested to sacrifice Isaac, and Mary, her womb, is representative of the new covenant. That's the new, Mary's womb is the Ark of the new covenant, which is Jesus. So for Christians, you might find it a little hard to accept historically that Mary was raised in the temple, but the meaning of the story as a devotional idea is pretty clear. But why on earth would somebody down in Mecca be interested in that unless the whole of the Quran was trying to point them towards Jerusalem?
You're right. But it adds to the sanctity of the Temple of Jerusalem within the Quran. So it's one more incentive for the believers to conquer Jerusalem and rebuild the Quran, because those believers, they were Christians. They believed in these stories of Mary having been raised in the temple. It appealed to them much more than a Jewish audience or a pagan audience. So it's one more reason for them to go and to go to Jerusalem, conquer the city and rebuild the temple. But I have another remark. You might find it historically odd that Mary was raised in the temple, but it makes sense in the Christian tradition. She would have been raised by the what's his name? The high priest of No, not Zechariah.
No.
I didn't get you.
Are you talking about Zechariah according to the Quran, chapter 3?
No. I'm talking here. I'm talking about the Gospels and the Christian tradition. Should Mary have been raised in the temple? She was something like. Hear me, Usama. Mary was something like 15 or 16 when she gave birth to Jesus, and so when before she was given to Joseph, she was in the temple being taught and instructed by the high priest of this time. I don't remember. It's Simeon.
Yeah.
And it would explain why Mary. It would explain why Mary had such a profound knowledge of the Jewish tradition, how she was able to compose recitations like she did. If you look at the Magnificat, I don't know the words in English, but it's a very complex composition that implies that the person who composed it knew almost all of the Torah and the Psalms and the prophets by heart. So anyway, it's not our point here. Our point is the Quran and Mecca and so on. But
let me throw something in here.
to answer to Paul, that it can make sense to have that this story that we find in the pseudo-evangelion or the pseudo-gospel of James, it might have some real historical background.
Yeah. Well, biblically, we know for sure that Mary could not be anywhere near the Holy of Holies, nor outside.
I'm not talking of her living in the Holies of Holies, of course. The Holy,
nor even outside of the court.
Holy.
Brother, there is no place.
Her living in the facility of the temple. You see, the temple was not only about the Holy of Holies and the Holy.
I know. Okay, there's 3 locations in the temple. The outside place is for the men, not women. They're talking about the Gentiles and the females outside. There is no. This is a myth. I don't know who heard it.
I agree. I fully agree. What I want to make you understand is when one talks about the temple, one can talk about the strict temple, like you defined it, but one could also talk about the whole Temple Mount with facilities, with places where there was a lesson, when there were lessons.
But let me throw something in here and try to take this in a direction where we actually have something concrete. This was uncovered in Bethlehem, right, on the way to Bethlehem, right? This is between the Temple Mount and Bethlehem. This is the Church of the Kathisma, right? And of course, this takes us back to the Pseudo-Evangelion of James, right? Where there's the story of what you've got is now this was the church that was uncovered. It was deliberately buried. It was torn down and deliberately buried. It was uncovered by accident when they built a highway and they preserved this. So what you've got here, this is a church which was being used by Christians and Muslims. So it had a mihrab in it, plus it was used by Christians. So there is clear evidence here that you had a unified religious group, the believers that were trying to create one unified religion. And on top of that, this is the model of the Dome of the Rock. So we know from historically, this is a longer talk we can do again another time, but the Dome of the Rock was modeled on this. They've even got references. This is an Islamic tile here, based on which is alluding to the Quranic story, but also the myth that she sat down and the tree bent down to give her dates, and there was a running water and so on. There was a spring like the little Zamzam that suddenly grew up and gave her water. So this story was relevant at the time in Jerusalem or just outside Jerusalem to Muslims, Jews, and Christians, but mostly Christians and the Muslims. So they try to pray together here at this place, which was, and here's the mihrab, if I can mention that. This was the Kathisma church. I want to go to a second point that may be relevant. Let me just bring this up here. The term mihrab and maqaraba, right? I'm not going to go into too much depth. Let me just see. We know where maqaraba is, right? We know the term was first used in 1646 by Bochart in Sacred Geography, right? I just want to mention this. So the Kaaba, outside of the Standard Islamic Narrative, nothing is known of its history, right? The whole thing started, as you said correctly, within the Quran. The only reason we presume that the Kaaba was in existence in the 2nd century is the mention of Mecca as Maqaraba by Ptolemy, right? However, Bochart is the man who said that Ptolemy was referring to Maqaraba as the present-day Mecca, right? We know that Ptolemy was referring to a location in Yemen, in Al-Mahabisha, the place of the Ethiopians, right? But also, Ptolemy did call the city Maqaraba, but the context and significance was the word miqrab, or temple, right? The term miqrab wasn't a prayer niche, it was temple. Mecca, right? So the name Maqaraba means temple in various Semitic languages, right? And in South Arabian, in Ethiopian, so in the Yemeni dialect as well as the Ethiopian, the term miqrab means temple. It's only in modern Islamic usage that it became prayer niche. That's a much later application. And then on top of that, these prayer niches have these false propylon or propyliae. I'm not going to get into that right now in terms of what it means symbolically, but it harkens back to Egypt, right? But so the whole idea of the prayer niche comes much later. And so there's allusions here, strong allusions to both South Arabia, Yemen specifically, and to Jerusalem again with the temple of the Kathisma, or the seat of Mary, where she sat on the way to give birth.
To Bethlehem, yeah.
Yeah. Can I add a little bit, if you don't mind, guys? The whole idea, which is Quran chapter 3, verse 44, where the scholars of Islam are building their case for Mary to live in the temple. It is because she was the daughter of a high priest, and all the priests loved him. And then he died after her birth, and her mama brought her to the temple, and she said, as you read in previous verses, here it is, I birthed a baby girl, and a girl looked not like a boy. So they were fighting with each other who would take responsibility to raise her. And that's when they decided, okay, they're going to cast the pen into the river. And they did the test not once, but twice. And each time, Zechariah, John the Baptist's daddy, won the bid and the mark, and he was able to take care of her. This is nonsense whatsoever. Why? Because biblically, Mary's father was alive when Joseph married her or went and proposed her to be taken from Mary. And she is not of the descendant of Aaron. She is not a Levite. She could not have a father who's a priest. And this is just all made up. So we take a made-up story by the scholars of Islam and whoever made up the verse in the Quran, and we look at some myth about Mary lived in the temple. The prayer she offered after she met with Elizabeth, she prayed it with the power of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit spoke on her. You don't need to go to a temple. You don't need to go to the synagogue to know how to pray that prayer, because it is the writing of the inspired word of her coming by the filling of the Holy Spirit in her. You got my point? I hope this clarifies the idea that, oh, she's very special. She's very holy. She was born from a virgin mother, and she was always a virgin after she birthed Jesus. This is making a human holy to be equal to God, which led to many false doctrine and false beliefs, sadly, spread in the church for years. So I'm not going to get into it, but what I'm saying is don't follow just myth and made-up stories by some people in the 4th century and Muhammad in the 6th century, whoever made up the story in the Quran. Thank you.
The thing that is of value to us here who are studying the Quran and engaging Islam is that we find in the Quran, obviously here in Surah 3, a sort of Arabic adaptation of the pseudo-gospel of James, so a Christian tradition. So it's not exactly the pseudo-gospel of James, it's an adaptation. It has been done by someone who I think wanted to convince an audience that was already familiar with the story.
I mean, we see it in Jerusalem, at the just outside Jerusalem, at the Church of the Kathisma, that this was a collaboration between Muslims and these Christians, or whatever, these Jewish Christians. So there's a strong impact on them both. Yeah.
There's another site, Lloyd, that's also physically quite interesting. By the way, I went to the Church of the Kathisma in December, because I went to the Holy Land. I went to midnight mass in Bethlehem, and we stopped off on the way and had a look at the Church of the Kathisma. But unfortunately, it was very windy, very cold, raining heavily. It wasn't possible to see it really at its best. But it is possible. Anybody who's in Jerusalem can just walk. You can walk there from Jerusalem, and there's a fence, but the fence is blown down, so anyone can just wander amongst there and be at the spot that could possibly have been the birthplace of Jesus, but doesn't get the attention that Bethlehem does. But there's another place, Lloyd. Another place. I don't know if you can have access. I don't know if you can on your screen. If you can do a Google search, a Google picture search for me.
I can try. Yeah, let's see.
Okay. Do you want to have a look for the Cradle of Jesus on Temple Mount? So if you write Cradle of Jesus, Temple Mount, let's see what we get. That's it. So there is an actual shrine on the Temple Mount, which is Jesus's cradle, and it's where the square trough is the manger, and the shrine above it, and this is to just allow people to understand where it is. This is in a corner, I understand, of the Stables of Solomon. And the Stables of Solomon is now a subterranean part of the Temple Mount, although I'm not certain in my own mind that it was always subterranean. I think at some stage it might have been a free-standing building, and during the course of the centuries, The bits have been found that have been filled in, so it's now underground, but it might not have been underground to begin with. And at some time, somebody has built this shrine to Mary and to Mary and Jesus. The alcove as a whole is called the Oratory of Mary, and it's apparently is where she spoke, or where the baby Jesus spoke to the people of Jerusalem in the as told in the Quran.
Very odd. I mean, when was the Islamic crescent placed on top of it? And then also we know from the earthquake, was it 63 or something like that, when it cracked the floor of the Dome of the Rock, and we discovered that underneath the Dome of the Rock there's multiple layers, and there's actually a Byzantine church under the Dome of the Rock, and then there's actually Jewish temples underneath that. So the Dome of the Rock couldn't have been there 1 million years ago because there are things underneath it that it was built on top of.
No, yeah, absolutely right. There is a huge amount there. I wanted to go and have a look at this place, and there's no, I can't see any reason why it is sacred to Muslims in any way in which it is not sacred to Christians and Jews. With the Dome of the Rock, they might say, well, this is where Muhammad stepped on the night journey, so that's why it's sacred to Muslims, and we don't want Jews and Christians to go in. But this place, which is 50 yards away, 100 yards away, is it's in the stables of Solomon, so it's a Jewish part of the old Jewish temple, possibly, or the Jewish. But Solomon had his palace up there, didn't he? So it could be part of Solomon's palace, and the only particular religious significance to it is that Muslims believe that Jesus and Mary were there. So why does that mean Christians can't go in? But they're so unwelcoming and so unfriendly up there that they got people on the doors just shooing away anyone who tries to wander in and have a look at it.
Paul, this reminds me of a theory of Mel. He did some videos on his channel several years ago. He presented a very odd subterranean chamber beneath the Dome of the Rock, which is called the Well of Souls, if I remember well.
I remember that video. It was very interesting.
And he was wondering whether a high-ranking Islamic figure could have been buried there in the very early times of Islam. Someone like Umar, or a messianic figure, would-be messianic figure, and it could explain why the place had such an appeal to the Arab believers.
There's a huge amount of archaeology to be done up there.
Yeah.
A lot to discover. So far, the only people who, not quite the only people, but the people who've made the most progress have been the British. When the British were there, we did a little bit of archaeology. We poked around the cisterns, and I think it was a British person who found the Byzantine church floor underneath the Al-Aqsa mosque. So, but since the British left, very little, if any, archaeology has been done on the mount. I think it's in all our interest. Anybody who's interested in the truth should want to have some proper scientific research done there, and then we can all learn something. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. The Well of Souls is a fascinating and mysterious place.
May I add something? According to the Standard Islamic Narrative, the reason that people are praying in the direction of Mecca is because Umar is the one who says to Muhammad, "Hey, wouldn't it be nice if people actually prayed in the direction of the station of Abraham?" And then, as if by miracle, Muhammad receives a revelation that says, "Hey, we are now going to turn your face." So according to their traditions, we're having a problem. Muhammad is there telling all of these stories about Abraham and all of that. Everyone would have understood. Everything is about Jerusalem. And then after Umar says his piece, Allah reveals a verse saying, oh no, actually everything happens here. Now everyone is praying here. Also, let's think about it. If Muhammad was going to tell people, actually all of those people are always wrong. This has nothing to do with Jerusalem. All of these people were buried here. The Quran would be very clear. It would actually be saying, can you believe that people think that it's all up there when all of this incredible history happened here? But the Quran never actually addresses those things. There are just disjointed verses here and there. So it would make sense that everything was about a very well-known place, hence why you don't really have to talk about it all the time. And then it is in the narrative that they transport everything and make it about Mecca. They try to make all of the verses match their narrative. But initially, when these verses were written, it was all about the biblical account.
I agree. I fully agree.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah.
And you will see in this next development about the kibla that it was all about Jerusalem also. This is what I I will present now. After all the developments on the temple, it's this the kibla question, the prayer direction. So the thing to ask first is, what is a kibla? If you look at the Arabic word kabal, it means before. It has not the meaning, the intrinsic meaning of a direction. It has the meaning of before, of what was before. And actually, a kibla is what is before, hence a tradition. And if you're talking about a tradition concerning the prayer, it can be a tradition about the direction of the prayer. And it is kind of the same word as the Hebrew Kabbalah, the tradition from the ancestor. And the Hebrew word was derived into Kabbalah, the Jewish Kabbalah.
Don't forget, there's also an Arabic Kabbalah as well. They have their own Kabbalah.
Also, but the interesting point here is that the kibla is much more. It's not much more. It's about a tradition, about something that was before, and in a derived meaning, it has given the word kibla referring to the direction of the prayer. And if you look at the concept of a direction of prayer within the Quranic text, you will find mentions to a kibla, but also mentions to other expressions, like the turning. You turn your face to a direction. And if you want to be exhaustive about this kibla issue in the Quran, you have to look for every mention of kibla and also every mention of a sort of turning of oneself, of the face toward the direction. And it's quite easy to do. If you look at the Quran, there are not that many passages that refer to a prayer direction. There is a long development in Surah 2. There is a first mention in Surah 2, verse 115, about the turning of one's face. Wherever you turn, there is the face of God. And thereafter, in verse 142, up to almost up to 150, there is a long development about the Qibla, and it's understood within the Islamic narrative as the moment when God asked Muhammad to change the prayer direction from Jerusalem to Mecca. But actually, if you really look at it, and if you look at all the expression, you can have you can develop a different hypothesis. First, the first mention of prayer direction, which is here. The prayer direction here is defined by the east, the sunrise, and the west, the sunset. This is what the verse literally says. The east and the west belong to God, so wherever you turn, there is a face of God. It's as if someone who was praying with a direction that is defined by the sunrise and the sunset was being told that it's not important to do so. I think it's the meaning of the verse. And if you look afterwards, there we have this story about the changing of the kibla. The fools among the people will say, what has turned them from the tradition or the kibla, the prayer direction, which were used to say, the east and the west belong to God. He guides whomever he pleased to a straight path. So this idea of a change, it's a change from a direction that was defined by the sunrise and the sunset to a new direction. Here in verse 2, 144, indeed, we see the turning of your face towards the heaven, which is kind of turning one's face towards a direction that is defined by the sunrise and the sunset. You have to look at the sun to determine the direction. So indeed, we see the turning of your face toward the heavens. So we will surely turn you according to a tradition, a kibla, you will be pleased with. So turn your face toward the direction of Masjid al-Haram, the forbidden place of worship. And wherever that you are, turn your faces in its direction. So the change here would be, you used to pray towards the direction to the east, for example. Now I ask you to turn yourself toward Jerusalem. So it's not about, it's different from the Islamic interpretation. In Islam, the former direction was Jerusalem and the new direction was Mecca. The text literally says the former direction was towards the sun, the sunset or the sunrise. I think it was toward the east, towards the sunrise, which is exactly what the Arab Christians used to do. They prayed to the direction that was defined by the east and the west. They prayed toward the sunrise. And here the preacher asks his Christian audience to ditch this tradition of praying toward the sunrise and instead to pray towards Masjid al-Haram, meaning Jerusalem. And if we look at the rest of the verse, it becomes clear. And indeed, those who were given the book, so the Jews, al-Kitab, surely know that it is the truth from their Lord, from their rabbi. And God is not aware of what they do. So here it would make sense. Should the preacher ask his audience to pray toward Jerusalem, it would make sense to say, indeed, the Jews surely know that it is the truth from their Lord, because the Jews prayed toward Jerusalem. If we interpret this verse within the Islamic narrative, it makes no sense at all. Because here, Muhammad supposedly asks pagans to pray toward Mecca, and thereafter he says, but the Jews, they know that it is the truth from their Lord. How come the Jews in Medina, because those are Medinan verses, would know that Mecca is the right prayer of the right direction of prayer? You see my point? And it is even clearer in the following verse. In Surah 2, 145, it is said, and even if you come to those who were given the book with all the signs or all the verses, it is the same word, not they would follow your tradition, your kibla, your prayer direction, and not will you be a follower of their tradition. and not some of them are followers of the tradition of others. And if you follow the desired after what came to you of the knowledge, indeed, you would then be surely among the wrongdoers. So what is explained here is that I ask you to pray toward Jerusalem. The Jew also prays toward Jerusalem because they know that it is a truth from their Lord. But if you were to come to them with all the verses explaining why we have to pray toward Jerusalem, they would not follow your own tradition. Actually, they will keep on praying toward Jerusalem, but for their own reason, not for the right reason that I, the preacher, ask you, that I, the preacher, have to ask of you to pray towards Jerusalem. And if you look at the explanation of this verse within the Islamic narrative, it is a complete nonsense, because the Jews are depicted here as praying towards Mecca, which cannot have been. Actually, it is much more simple when you put it this way. If you took the literal meaning of the verses, there was a former kibla, which was a prayer direction, a Christian prayer direction towards the sunrise, which is explained literally in the Quran as being a direction that is defined by the sunrise and the sunset. And it is supposedly, according to the Islamic narrative, a direction of prayer toward Jerusalem. But the real meaning of it is that it is the Christian prayer direction toward the sunrise. And the new Qibla that is proposed to the audience in the Quran is turn your face towards Jerusalem, toward the forbidden place of worship, so not Mecca. And surely the Jews already do it, but if you do it, you won't be like them. It's not because you pray towards Jerusalem that you will become a follower of the Jewish tradition. So I think it is much more clearer to understand this verse according to these verses, according to their literal meaning. Now, the new Qibla is the direction of prayer toward Jerusalem and not Mecca, which the Jews were already observing. However, the believers did not adopt this new direction. Now is sorry for the. It did not adopt this new direction in order to become like the Jews. And I think it makes way more sense than the explanation of the Islamic narrative, which is completely crazy, in my opinion. And it is also another argument for the Jerusalem Thesis. So, what do you make of this? Were my explanations clear?
Crystal clear, Odon.
Oh,
absolutely agree.
Because, I was struggling with my English a bit.
I mean, it does say that they are quit of you. Remember, they say we will now follow the tradition of Abraham before it was corrupted by you guys, and we are quit of you. So at some point they were in alignment, and at another point they decided, okay, we're going to do the exact opposite of you guys because we disagree now, and they forged their own identity. So there's an element of that as well. But clearly they're trying to cause confusion within the text and trying to rewrite it to justify their position.
No, and the confusion is such that the new explanation is you cannot understand it. It's not logical. It doesn't make any sense because it requires that the Jews of Medina already knew that they should pray toward Mecca. But how could they have known?
They've never prayed towards Mecca.
the traditional narrative. You've got the mosque of the two qiblas, the mosque of the Masjid Qiblatain in the Yathrib, Medina, where the story goes that this verse was revealed by the Prophet Muhammad, and somebody ran into this mosque whilst everybody is at prayer and tells them, "Oh, you're all praying towards Jerusalem. You don't. You should pray towards Mecca." And everyone stands up, and by the geography of the place, from where Medina is, it's almost 180 degrees to turn from facing Jerusalem to turn to face Mecca. So everyone would have to stand up and suddenly turn around and start praying in the opposite direction. But that can't possibly be true, because verse 142 starts, the Qibla section begins, "The fool among the people say, what has turned them away from their Qibla that they have been following?" So the verse assumes that the change has already taken place, and people have been mocking the Muslims for having changed their direction, and this is the response to that mockery. So it couldn't possibly have been announced as a sudden surprise move in the way that the traditional narrative depicts it. The traditional narrative always makes me rather think of that scene in 1984, where the crowd go for a rally to support the war against Eurasia, and then somebody comes through with a message and says, "No, we're fighting East Asia now," and everyone starts tearing all the posters down and starts doing the same chants, but with the new enemy. The people change so instantly, but it couldn't possibly have happened like that. For that reason. Also, if I may, I'm not sure if you quoted, because I lost my sound at one stage, Odon. So, did you mention verse 146, which always seems to me to be quite relevant?
Just before. Let me get to the controls of. Okay, here. Those who were given the book, they recognize it, like they recognize their sons, and indeed, a group of them, surely they conceal the truth while they know.
Yes.
So how on earth?
How on earth could the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, recognize Mecca as they know their own children? How can any Muslim try and justify that interpretation of the verse? You can't find any evidence of any Christian or Jew having heard of Mecca prior to the Quran, and by their own story, everybody had neglected Mecca. It was this super well-kept secret that nobody knew about.
Yeah,
especially possibly the people of the book know it as their own children.
Yeah, especially when we know that the direction taken for the Christian towards Jerusalem is not actually that biblical teaching, because we pray without season, we pray without direction. God can hear us and see us anywhere. It was more of a Jewish, after the building of the temple, as Solomon established it, when he stated his prayer concerning the temple which he built for the Lord, that people will pray towards that house if they have this and this and pray towards that house. So it is Solomon tradition, Solomon belief, not Abraham. I'm nothing to do with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or anybody before him, not Moses. No, not at all.
There's another thing to be said here. You were talking, Paul, about the believers being mocked for having changed their prior direction. And why are they being mocked? Because they changed their prior directions toward Jerusalem. And so they are being mocked by people telling them, you are Jews, you are doing as the Jews do. And thereafter, we have the verses 144, 145, explaining, no, don't worry, you are not like the Jews. You might pray in the same direction, but you don't do it for the same reasons. So you are not Jews. So it's a sort of response to the mockery. Otherwise, it does not make sense, because the response within the Islamic narrative is nonsense.
Brother, in 142, it's not talking about the people changes the direction. It is Muhammad is the one who changes the direction.
Yeah.
I just want to mention something that
also. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the narrative is one thing, but I think we should also try to stick very close to what is physical and real, which is archaeology, verifiable history. Because, again, who is the only woman that is named explicitly in the Quran?
There are two, actually. Two women. They have the same name, Maryam.
So Mary is the only woman. I mean,
no, there are
if
two Marys.
They'll tell you Mary is the only woman named, right? So the
mother only woman named, but there are two Marys in the Quran. There is Mary, Mary, mother of Jesus, and Mary, sister of Aaron. Two Marys.
Yeah, I think they confused the two, right? But we know that Mary's
they're not confused.
Can I finish my sentence? When we get to my point,
Okay.
Mary is named in the Quran. It's accepted as the only woman that is named. It doesn't speak of Aisha. It doesn't speak of nobody except Mary, the mother of Jesus. She's clearly important, right? Now, again, it argues about all of these details with a Jewish and Christian audience, not with pagans. And you go back to the Kathisma, they built a church in her honor, right? Which Muslims attended, which Muslims revered, until there was some kind of break, and they flattened it and they buried it until it was found again. And I'm sure, and as we see in archaeology lately, we're starting to find evidence of other such temples, Christian temples, flattened and buried in places like Qatar and Bahrain and Saudi. We're finding more and more of these places that are being surfaced all of a sudden. So clearly there was some kind of, I don't know, collaboration between Muslims and Christians at the time, and then there was a split. Right.
Yeah.
But if we look at the hard evidence, you've got Mary, who is critical, and you've got the Church of the Kathisma. The Dome of the Rock is modeled on the Church of the Kathisma. That whole legend of the Kathisma makes its way straight into Islam, right? The whole myth, that entire story makes its way straight into Islam. So clearly there's a very strong physical aspect, because we can go in circles on interpretation of doctrinal ideas or, whatever's in the Quran. But when you bring it back to physical archaeology, then this again starts to look like this is Jerusalem, this is Mary, this is an argument between people arguing about the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't think we are going around in circles here. The interpretation I propose is, I think it's very logical, much more logical than the Islamic narrative. But I agree on your archaeological question. I have another point here. There was in Petra, around the 4th and 5th century, there still was a tomb, the tomb of the sister of Aaron, of Mary, sister of Aaron. And this tomb, you can find a trace of it in Augustine's Onomasticon, the book of the name of the places' names. He mentions it. It was in the Petra site, and it is nowhere to be found today. There is still the tomb of Aaron, but the tomb of Mary, sister of Aaron, is nowhere to be found. And this is something that goes with your remark, Lloyd. At the moment, the tomb was leveled or buried or something because it did not fit the narrative. And I think during the early stages of Islam, there was this analogy in the Quran that we still find it today, between Mary, mother of Jesus, and Mary, sister of Aaron. Mary, sister of Aaron, she led the people out of the desert. She gave them water. Her prayers, were the reason why God sent a sort of huge rock. Out of it, water poured.
Right.
And,
so this is a Moses reference, because if you look at the split in the Quran, you have Jesus and Moses are the two dominant characters. So now you've got a woman related to Jesus and a woman related to Moses.
Exactly. That would have made sense for early Christians.
Yeah.
And especially that would have made sense for Christians that were in Petra or knew about Petra, because there was the tomb of Mary, sister of Aaron, there, and also the river of Moses and the tomb of Aaron.
Okay.
But at a later stage, when the Islamic narrative developed, the biblical context had to be forgotten, had to be destroyed, had to be leveled. And so everything Christian or Jewish, like the buildings and the tombs and so on, it was erased.
Right. We're seeing more archaeology come to light, and I think it's the archaeology, because look, we can posit hypotheses and interpretations of the story. I mean, Paul has one, you have one, I have one. We tend to converge, right? We do tend to converge, but you can argue on details. But where there's physical, hard evidence, we should also value that. And clearly, there's, I mean, where's the argument in the Quran on pagan ideas and pagan things, which should be the main focus, at least 30-40% of it, and there's exactly roughly zero.
Yeah, Brother Lloyd, nothing you can go back to the Quran to find solid answer for any subject. But I just want to make sure, maybe Paul, Odin and I have a little bit of disagreement here. These verses 142, 143, 144, 145 is talking about Muhammad. Let me say it again. That is Al-Tabari, that is Ibn Kathir, that's Al-Qurtubi, that is Al-Jalalain, that is Al-Baydawi, that is Ad-Damakhshari. All Muslim scholars I read for, okay, they all agree it was Muhammad who changed the direction of his prayer. He used to pray in Mecca, towards Mecca, and then he prayed towards Jerusalem, and then it did not work. He went back to Mecca. That is the problem. And Allah insists in the end, it is what he wants to do is towards Mecca. This is the interpretation of the scholar. They may be 100% wrong. The verse is talking about the Sufaha, the mockers among the Jews and the Christians, mocking Muhammad about changing his way of prayer. And I believe personally Muhammad did it because he was trying to appease, if you follow the story, there maybe was not one Jew in Mecca or Medina, but he was trying to appease the Jews and the Christian as the imagination of those who made up the story to say, hey, we're going to worship together towards the holy place, your holy place. It did not work, as in other places he tried to please the worshippers of Allah wal Uzza wal Manat, the three gods of Quraysh. And as he tried to please Sabaeans and the Jews and the Christian in Quran chapter 2 verse, I believe 60, whatever, where he tried to please them, say, we all, those who believe and do good deeds, and they will not fear on them, and they will have, the reward from Allah. That's the story of, or the narrative behind what Muhammad is trying to do. But nothing solid in Islam, no truth whatsoever about any subject, about any topic. It's like somebody's drunk under the influence of some drugs and make up stuff. And the worse than that is when you read the scholars of interpretation, like I was reading while you guys are talking, they give you 10 different opinions about the same verse. Which one do you like? Do you want the blue? We got the blue, we got green, we got pink, we got yellow, we got all the colors. Choose the color you like, and that's your color.
Yeah, but there's room to interpret it in alignment with what we know of history or of Christian doctrine, right? Or of myths and legends. So there's certainly room to look at that and go, okay, this seems to align with this. I mean, it's clear in some cases there's allusions to biblical verses, biblical stories, where they're even mixing two separate stories and then building some story So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like, I mean, there's what the Islamic narrative says, there's what the scholars say, and there's what we can actually determine based on what we know of history now as well. So,
And
I mean, there's
in
room
many
for
cases,
third-party opinion here, you know.
yeah, and in many cases, you cannot go with the Quran or the scholars of the Quran because they make no sense whatsoever.
Right.
Can I add something to this? So, obviously, everything to do with Islam is a fabrication, and of course, I mean, they believe that the whole thing is fabricated hundreds of years after the time of Muhammad. If there was one guy who called Muhammad who was the one fabricating the stories, well, wouldn't really change much. I really think that it is the scholars much later. But when we look at the narrative tells us very clearly that they were trying to relocate a place, everything from up north, from the Jerusalem area, south. For example, in the narrative, they say that all of the prophets were actually buried in Mecca. And I don't think that anyone can say that with a straight face. It's like, absolutely, that didn't happen. So we know that they are trying to take things that happen up north and say, no, that was here, come on pilgrimage and give us money. So that's actually what happens. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's hard to believe that even when this book is talking about a city and talking about events, that those events will also be in Jerusalem or nearby in a region people understood. And then they get transported to Mecca as part of the narrative. I mean, we have seen something similar in other places. So I would think, all things being equal, if it was that it was not about Jerusalem, the book would be very clear because Muhammad would have been telling people, forget about Jerusalem and all of those things. It would be all about Mecca. And we know that that's not the case because even according to the narrative, just a few years after he dies, they conquered Jerusalem. So we know that Jerusalem was always the prize. So, and Mecca is basically just not featured in the book. That's my 2 pence.
Yeah,
Agree.
JC, we couldn't hear you very well. Your microphone makes you sound like you're underwater.
I am underwater.
Yeah, no,
this
but your
was
mic is.
good.
But look, obviously, the story migrated from Jerusalem, and then they had to go find a new clean blank slate, and they found one and slapped dab in the middle of the desert. But in that region, there was clearly tradition and history already. There was a myth and so on already, religious tradition and whatnot. They had to blend it into that tradition. They had to find a way to make it fit and merge it. So clearly, there's going to be a merging of various ideas. So there's a, and then of course they had to still fit the story to fit their own narrative. So there's clearly a lot of moving parts here.
What I find interesting, or an insight into this, is there are 2 places in the Quran where the Masjid al-Haram is compared or contrasted with somewhere else. Most of the time, it's just a place that is referred to in the course of a verse. But there are 2 places where it is juxtaposed with another place. One is in the night journey, where the messenger of God is taken from the Masjid al-Haram to the furthest al-Haram, Masjid al-Aqsa, the Masjid al-Aqsa, so that from the holy place of prostration to the furthest place of prostration. And the other is in the kibla, where the kibla was changed from one place. We're not really told much about where it was, but I agree with Odon that the phrase "to Allah belongs the east and the west" tends to suggest it might well have been to the east. And there's changed, the kibla changed to the Masjid al-Haram. So in both the instances where the Masjid al-Haram is contrasted with a different location, there's virtually no clue as to what this other location is. The furthest place of worship could be anywhere, just somewhere a long way away, unless it's the other side of the world, which could be the case. And the Qibla, we're not really told in the Quran where there's other places. I found it interesting that in both instances, the other place has become Jerusalem. That the night journey has become a journey to Jerusalem, and the Qibla changed. Oh, the old Qibla was to Jerusalem. There's nothing in the text to suggest that the other place, the place that isn't the Masjid al-Haram, was Jerusalem. But in both instances, the traditional narrative makes it Jerusalem, contrast. Almost, I would say it sounds almost Freudian. That if you want to avoid attention, don't draw attention to Jerusalem. Oh, this place is not Jerusalem. It's somewhere else, somewhere that isn't Jerusalem. So the moment you get somewhere else, it always becomes Jerusalem because it's praying so much on their mind. The only thing they know about anywhere else is that it can't possibly be Jerusalem, and that in itself inversely becomes a clue that the real Masjid al-Haram was Jerusalem.
Yeah. We should wrap up here. It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes so far.
Oh,
so
okay.
I can go on. We're only just getting started. Another 2 hours.
Amen.
I've got material here for many
I'm
hours.
gonna order a pizza then in the meantime while we go on.
No, we'll do it next week. Next week.
Yeah. And next week we'll be talking about other elements of sacred geography, namely the place of the Hajj, the place of the pilgrimage, the place of the Umrah, and the descriptions within the Quran. We'll see that, for example, the hills, Safa and Marwa, are actually in Jerusalem. I have also stuff about the night journey. If you look into the Jewish tradition, there is a night journey already there. Moses does a night journey from Egypt to the sanctuary. It is described in the Jewish tradition, and he does it on a winged animal.
Wow.
Also an interesting coincidence.
Interesting. And this is Zoroastrian story as well, the Artevera.
Yeah, there was a mixed when the Islamic narrative was fabricated. They took from Persian legends also, and also other legends.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, they try to mix it up. They seriously. Yeah. So Odon. So
time enough. I have many other topics to discuss.
By the way, I just want to let you guys know
one thing.
Yeah.
It's all about Jerusalem.
Oh, sure. I'd like to guys, I just said we should call it a night, and I'd like everyone to know that the term call it a night actually comes from Islamic science. Islamic scientists got on one of their carpets and they went into space and they were observing the planet, and it was turning around, and they witnessed the curvature of the earth, that it was round and it spun. And actually, one of the scientists turned to one of the other Muslim scientists and said, "Look, I'm getting bored watching this thing spin. Can we just call it a day and move on?" So that's how we got the words days, right?
Yeah, call it a night.
Yeah. So
God
if it wasn't for Islam, we'd still be in the dark ages.
Amen. Thanks to be to Allah for the grace, for the great Muslim scientist. All right. God bless you all. Appreciate you. Appreciate you all.
It's been fantastic. Thanks, guys. We shall see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Odon. It was a magnificent presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent work, Odon.
I feel a lot more comfortable in Jerusalem than in Mecca. I find that's great.
Amen. Amen.
Okay. Take care, guys. Good night, everyone. God bless.
All right. Bye-bye.